Okay, good afternoon and welcome to the Sustainable Materials Management webinar series, a joint effort between the National Recycling Coalition and the Pennsylvania Recycling Market Center. My name is Wayne Bowen and I'm the program manager for the Market Center and will serve as your moderator today. We would like to extend a special thanks to Bob Hollis of the Mobius Network for providing the webinar management software for this series, and Lisa Ruggiero of the National Recycling Coalition for providing technical support. Today's webinar will focus on asphalt shingle recycling. Our presenter today is Mr. Jason Haus, who I will introduce in a moment. Following Jason's presentation, we will conduct a question and answer session. If you do have a question or comment, please use the GoToWebinar dialog box located in the control panel on your screen. You may also use the dialog box to request assistance if you are experiencing technical difficulties during the webinar. Please note that an edited version of this webinar will be made available for viewing via YouTube links on the National Recycling Coalition and Pennsylvania Recycling Market Center websites. And now I'd like to introduce our presenter, Jason Haus, who's the CEO of Dem-Con Companies. Dem-Con is a third-generation construction and demolition waste handling and recycling operation. Dem-Con's facilities consist of a 120-acre C&D landfill, 2 mixed C&D processing facilities, a single-stream recycling facility, a municipal waste transfer station, and a dedicated shingle recycling facility that also offers mobile shingle grinding services. Jason has been involved with the development in end markets for these materials at their facilities, as well as working for continued market stability across the country. Jason currently sits on the executive committee for the C&D Recycling Association as the vice president. He's a certified trainer for the Solid Waste Association of North America. He's a member of the Environmental Committee for the National Demolition Association and serves as a committee chair for the CDRA's Shingle Recycling Committee. Jason has been focused on the recovery and recycling efforts related to C&D materials locally in the state of Minnesota, as well as nationally, while serving on these committees, also involving the EPA and the recovery efforts of C&D materials. Okay, Jason, that's a very impressive biography there. So I'm going to turn the program over to you.
All right. Well, thanks, Wayne. We'll get going here. And my goal today is just kind of give an overview of asphalt shingle recycling, some of the ways that we've been able to move the markets forward here in Minnesota and for those states that are out there. Hopefully they can take some of this information if they're just beginning to look into the process, take that and use it to their advantage. And if they're already in the market, maybe there's some different pieces that they can take away and monopolize on what they have going on in their marketplace a little bit better than they are today. So with that, we'll keep moving. We'll move on to the next slide. And just a little bit about Dem-Con Companies. As Wayne had said, we're a third-generation family-owned company. We've been in the South Minneapolis marketplace since 1965, and our business consists of 5 main business units. The landfill, which is a 120-acre site that was started about 1985. We have a liner and leachate collection system, which allows us to take all kinds of C&D debris and some non-hazardous industrial waste as well. Our recovery and recycling operation is our C&D MRF. We can process about 90,000 tons per year within that facility. Our recycling rates since inception of that facility hover right around the mid-60s. So we do as good a job as we can. We've been heavily involved with LEED and the U.S. Green Building Council and the new revisions that have come out. So we're very much in the marketplace of C&D recycling. And then shingle processing, we started this in 2008. We've been working for quite a few years prior to that to get this thing moving. But we're the first facility in Minnesota to be granted the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency approval to have a post-consumer shingle recycling facility. We also are MnDOT, that's our Department of Transportation. We're a quality assurance, quality controlled, certified facility. And we do about 25,000 ton per year on site here where we bring the material in, store it, separate it, clean it up, prepare it for market. And we also offer mobile grinding services as well. We do about 45,000 tons per year off-site. There's a lot of other quality mobile shingle grinding companies out there too. Some are considerably larger than us, we tend to stay pretty close to home in our operations, so we don't venture too far away from the twin cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul, but we do about 45,000 tons per year off-site. And then most recently, we opened a material recovery facility that is a single stream plant. So we do about 92,000 ton per year of residential and commercial single stream. And then in addition to that, that same facility also processes about 40,000 tons per year of commercial recyclables, typically most source separated OCC predominantly. So this slide is just an overview of what we like to call our environmental campus. You can see a picture of the landfill. Some areas closed. The open working face areas where the arrow is pointing to right now. The C&D MRF off to the right, you can see that's about a 40,000 square foot facility. In addition, we have about an 8,500 square foot wood housing building that, as we process our wood materials from the C&D MRF, it's processed into that building where we then load it into walking floor trailers and send that material to about 5 different marketplaces. Our office and shop, all of our equipment maintenance, different things like that. I'm actually sitting in the office right there on the corner right now. Shingle recycling, you can see it's about a 5-acre lot, so that gives you, kind of a scope of the size of the picture that you're looking at right now. This area is where we handle all of our post-consumer tear-off shingles. If you look off to the upper right-hand corner, there's a little black spot just probably to the 2 o'clock area of the landfill arrow. That's where we process all of our manufactured scrap. We process those in 2 different areas. We have 2 different specs, and our hot mix asphalt producers like those materials separated, so we do not blend those together. And then in the bottom picture, the single stream MRF, that's about a 60,000 square foot facility that just opened up about a year ago. So a new operation for us, and that's been going pretty well. So we like to do a bunch of different things. This was a study that was done by Folk Infrastructure and Environment a few years back. Some of the data is a little dated, but it's one of the better pieces that I've seen that talk about the different components of C&D. We see a lot of waste studies and waste sorts done on MSW. We don't see near as many done on C&D, which is what we kind of process on a daily basis. So when we have information like this at our fingertips, we tend to use it quite a bit. So as you look at this slide, we highlighted the amount of roofing that was done in each of these different waste sorts, and the roofing that was found as a % of material by weight. So as you look, obviously wood is a high percentage for us here in Minnesota, and one of the next highest percentages is roofing material. So within that roofing material, it's post-consumer tear-off shingles, it's in industrial scrap shingles, as well as flat roofing. But flat roofing is a pretty small percentage of those numbers. So it tells you that there's a lot of asphalt roofing material out in the marketplace that is ready to be recycled. So that was one of the things we looked at pretty heavily when we decided to get into the business. All right, next slide, Wayne. So as we had mentioned before, there's 2 different types of asphalt roofing shingles that we'll talk about today. One is manufactured scrap shingles. The latest studies show that there's about 1 million ton of manufactured scrap shingles that are generated on an annual basis, and the majority of those comes from the 3 main producers, Owens Corning, CertainTeed, and GAF. All of which we're lucky in Minnesota. We have all 3 of those plants that operate in the Twin Cities. At one point in time, we have taken material from all 3 of those. They've been great to work with. They're very involved in the CDRA Shingle Recycling Committee. They have sponsored a lot of different shows, sessions, webinars, our shinglerecycling.org website. So those manufacturers of shingles are very interested in seeing this material get recycled, and nationwide the majority of that tonnage is currently being recovered, which is a nice statistic. The second type of asphalt shingle is the post-consumer tear-off. That's estimated that annually there's 11 million tons of this material generated nationwide. On an annual basis, that is a heck of a lot of shingle material. You know, of that, the percentage that's recycled is continuing to grow. However, we have a long row to hoe to keep all this material out of the landfill. So it gives you a little bit of scope with what we're dealing with as far as tonnages. The beauty of this material is if we can develop marketplaces for this, all this material can end up being recycled, and you wouldn't have to landfill but a very small percentage of material that couldn't be used. So so that's the good news. Now we just need to make sure we can move states along and get this into their specifications. Next slide. So we'll talk a little bit more in detail about manufactured scrap, and these percentages are estimates based on what we've found from working with hot mix asphalt plants, and depending on what part of the country the shingle's produced in, these numbers will vary a little bit. But the actual asphalt content within a fiberglass shingle ranges anywhere from 15 to 24%, and there's a pretty decent variation in range in there, but that's all based on the type of shingle that's produced. We've all seen shingles that are 20-year, 50-year shingles, and you know, the majority of that is dictated on what ingredients go in there. So there's a decent range. What we've typically found in our marketplace in Minnesota, the manufactured scrap shingles have around 22% asphalt within them. There are some manufactured facilities that are making organic-based shingles. That has a much higher percentage of asphalt within them. We're seeing that in the 30% plus range. So if you're in a marketplace that people are still manufacturing organic shingles, you'll see higher asphalt content, which is a little bit more valuable to a shingle processor as well as a hot mix asphalt plant. But a lot of manufacturing facilities have moved away from organic-based shingles, but there still are a few out there. To be able to recycle the manufactured scrap shingle, there is quite a bit less work and regulation that needs to be done related to it, because it is coming off of a manufacturing process. MSDS sheets are relatively easy to obtain. You know what's in the product. Typically, you're just making sure that it's not a nuisance, and then making sure that your individual state requirements are being handled. But it's typically less burdensome and arduous to get a recycling plant permitted if you're just dealing with manufactured scrap. This material is a little bit more difficult to process. The asphalt that's on these shingles isn't really no different than the post-consumer tear-off shingles from an ingredient perspective, but it hasn't been on the roof to oxidize as the post-consumer shingles have, so it's a little bit more pliable. It's a little softer, and thus when you're processing material, it tends to be a little more gooey. For example, on very, very warm days, this material is a little bit more challenging to process. And then in addition to that, once you do have it processed, it tends to kind of re-agglomerate back together much quicker than post-consumer tear-offs, just because of the asphalt and the non-oxidized components of it tend to stick back together. So you need to move this a little bit quicker once you've processed it. The manufactured scrap material, as a percentage of the weight, typically has a higher percentage of granules because they haven't sat on any roofs. They haven't been aged in that way. When they're being tore off and thrown into the dumpster, you tend to lose a lot of the granule product during that process as well. When you get manufactured scrap material, it's coming right off the plant floor typically, so the granules for the most part are held in place. So you have a higher percentage of granules, which results in asphalt content being a little bit lower as a percentage of the product. More granules means higher equipment wear, and for any of you that know that ceramic style aggregate that's on a shingle is very, very abrasive. So as that percentage is higher of the material you're processing, your wear costs tend to go up a little bit. The nice thing about manufactured scrap shingles, though, is there's less contamination. It's easier to control. It's coming right from the plant. You can work with the manufacturing plant to make sure that what they're sending you is shingles and shingles only, and that's one of the things that makes this material nice to deal with. So I can speak from experience from Certainty, GAF, and Owens Corning in our marketplace. They do a really nice job of keeping that material clean from a plant perspective. So there's less contamination, worries, and issues that you have to worry about when it's coming right from the plant. The one cautionary tale or advice that I'll give is if there is manufacturing plants that include roll material in their product that they send to recycle yards, it's just very difficult to process. They tend to bog the piece of equipment down on the grinding side. Doesn't matter which grinder you have, they all are challenged with trying to process an entire roll of shingle or an entire roll of tar paper. So if you're looking into the marketplace and you're starting those discussions with manufacturing plants, just make sure that that's part of your discussion, knowing whether or not that material is included in there or not. The second and the other type of shingle material is post-consumer tear-off, so it's just a fancy name for old shingles that were on somebody's house. This asphalt content typically slightly higher than the post-manufacturing waste material. The asphalt content typically is seen anywhere between 20 to 25, sometimes a little bit higher than that. We push close to 25 in our marketplace on the post-consumer tear-off material. There's less granule material due to the wear and handling, as I mentioned before. So as you lose granules at different spots along the process, your asphalt as a percentage of the shingle weight tends to go up a little bit. The asphalt's a little stiffer due to the oxidation process that happens when it sits on the roof. One easy way to tell this is if you go and look at a brand new shingle, you can take it, you can bend it, and it'll bend real easy. You take a shingle that's been sitting on somebody's roof for a number of years, you try to bend it in the same way, and it'll crack in half. So the asphalt is a little bit more stiff. One of the nice things about that is it doesn't re-agglomerate nearly as fast as the manufacturing material does. We can have this material sit in its final state for multiple weeks, even a month, and it doesn't really re-agglomerate back together, where the manufactured scrap in the warm summer months, within 4 days or so, you have to rescreen that material because it just clumps back up into bigger balls. Post-consumer tear-off, again, has a higher threshold of regulations, at least in Minnesota and other states as well, from the folks that we've worked with. But it does vary widely by state. In Minnesota, for example, we have to have permits for handling these materials because when we accept them, the majority of the loads aren't clean enough to be considered a source-separated load. We still see empty pails of tar, sometimes half-full pails of tar, caulk tubes of tar, different things like that aren't just shingle material. So it's a little more rigorous when it comes to the regulations surrounding it. And then in addition, when we first started in the process, asbestos testing was kind of the big buzz surrounding this. There was a high level of concern about asbestos being in the shingle material that we're processing and we're grinding and we're putting it back into a road material. So I'll talk a little bit more about asbestos testing a little bit later on, but that was the one piece that we had to make sure we had all of our ducks in a row prior to us moving down the road of recovering this material, but I'll touch on that a little bit later. And it does require more processing to eliminate the contamination. Like I had said, the manufactured scrap material comes in pretty clean. The post-consumer tear-off is quite a bit more dirty. So I just have a couple photos coming up here. I'll talk about them a little bit as we move through. This one is just a shot of our shingle recycling yard. You can see the material in the foreground has to be cleaned up yet. You can see those are just loads that have been brought into the site, tipped. There's been a pre-sort done to those, and I'll get into that a little bit later as well. But you can still see a lot of plastic that needs to be removed. And other materials that aren't shingle and shingle paper that you need to take out of there before you start processing. On the background to the right, you can see a little bit more clean material, darker material. That has already been cleaned up through our sorting line, so really at that point it should just be shingles and shingle paper. Then you can see we're just moving a load of that material over to the grinder as we're grinding it, and then we'll typically screen it as well after, depending on where it's going and what their specification is. But we'll usually grind first, screen later, and then the material on the upper left-hand corner, you can see just kind of a black pile over there. That's ground material that's currently stockpiled, being ready to moved out to market. The next photo is just a picture of us grinding or manufactured scrap material. So obviously the picture just prior to this was post-consumer tear-off. This is a photo of our manufactured scrap, much cleaner. We really didn't do anything to this pile. That's kind of what it looks like as it comes in. We feed this piece of equipment with a backhoe. It tends to feed pretty well, pretty smoothly, and then you can see the material coming off the belt. Depending on what size we're grinding to, we can, anywhere between 80 to 90 ton per hour coming off of those pieces of equipment is about what we see on a continuous basis, whether it's cold weather or warm weather. That's kind of the average that we see. So pretty good, steady eddy type of equipment that just processes on a daily basis. But this is our manufactured scrap pile. And this last picture I have before we go into other details is a picture of a conveyor at a hot mix asphalt plant. So when we started our process here, we had all the folks from the Minnesota Department of Transportation come out to our facility, and the two issues that they really wanted to look at were asbestos testing, and then they were really worried about the nails on the post-consumer side. So what this piece of equipment is a conveyor that feeds an in-feed conveyor that goes to the hot mix asphalt plant. But what this conveyor does is it has a drum, steel drum magnet on the end, just a magnetic head pulley, and the MnDOT folks literally for an hour stood at the end of this conveyor and tried to watch for nails coming off the end of it. And the good news was they didn't find a single nail during that process. What they did find were a couple stainless steel staples, and the staples obviously aren't going to get caught by a magnet, but the magnet did not throw off any nails, so that tells you that the material was pretty clean as it was delivered to the hot mix asphalt plant. So we delivered a good clean product to the plant, and that really helped move us along quickly, because they were expecting to see quite a bit of contamination coming off this, because they just couldn't believe that the equipment on the front end in our yard was able to take the nails out at the quantity that they were seeing them come out of there. So that was the good news. So next slide, Wayne. So some of the things that we'll talk about today, and again, it'll vary quite a bit by state, but some of the regulatory items that you might have to deal with depending on how your state operates. This is just an example of the state of Minnesota and the different things that we needed to walk through. We need to have a quality assurance and quality control document. And really what that is for us is a document that talks about each of our steps and processes from the time that material arrives at our site, each different step and process as we touch it, as we sort it, as we grind it, screen it, load it out. What we do is very described in detail, and we have to make sure that we follow that for every load that comes into our facility, to make sure that the hot mix asphalt plants know that if they take a delivery from our plant, it went through this exact process. So specifications, certifications, that's another piece that we're continually regulated by the individual hot mix asphalt plants, as well as the Minnesota Department of Transportation. Will come to our site, take samples, make sure that we're meeting the quality control that we need to meet. They have pretty rigorous specifications before they put it into their hot mix asphalt blend, so they want to make sure that what they're receiving meets the specifications that they're expecting within their mix designs. Asbestos testing, as I had mentioned earlier, was probably one of the largest hurdles for us to get over. There was a lot of discussion about asbestos being used in shingle manufacturing quite a few years ago. We wanted to make sure that there isn't any asbestos remaining in this product as we send it out. The Minnesota Department of Transportation actually has a state statute that they cannot allow asbestos-containing products to be used in anything that they build. So they were pretty sensitive to make sure that we could offer a high level of assurance that the material we were sending to hot mix asphalt plants did not contain asbestos. So we've done a lot of work on our end. There's been a lot of work done nationwide. When we started this process back in 2008, I did my own kind of research and summary from the folks that I've met over time and at different conferences to try to develop a list of samples that have been taken and what the results were. And back in 2008, I had accumulated over 100,000 data points. And of those 100,000 data points, we had found 13 instances of asbestos material being detected above 1%. Most of those weren't in the shingle itself. It was in a mastic material that was slathered on a shingle, if you will, around a break point or around a chimney or a patch or something like that. So we've done a lot of work on our end to make sure that this material, to the best that we can, is asbestos free. And I'll go into a little bit more detail about what we do and some additional sampling analysis that we've had done. And then air permits for equipment, depending on where you grind, different states have different requirements. If it's a mobile piece, they may be a little bit more lenient. If it's a permanent piece of equipment, they may be a little bit more arduous, that you have to obtain an air permit for that shingle grinder or that screener, depending on the horsepower of the equipment, different things like that. Different states have different requirements. So it's just more of one thing to be aware of as you either permit locally or you look at doing mobile grinding. And then local zoning and conditional use requirements. That's kind of a standard feature. If you're trying to deal with different materials, you just have to make sure you meet all your zoning and conditional use requirements if you want to start up a facility. All right, Wayne, next slide. I'll just go into detail of a couple of the things on the previous slide. So our quality assurance, quality control plan, some of the things that ours include are inspection requirements, what our personnel training program is, how do we train our folks that are dealing with this material, what's our process management plan. That's what I had mentioned a little earlier, where from the time that material gets to our site to the time it leaves, we in detail talk about each of the different steps that it goes through to make sure that we're processing it to the specifications that we tell people that we are. And then our sampling procedures, how do you sample, what's your sampling process, how are you recording the results, housekeeping, how are you keeping the site looking clean, cleaning up windblown debris, different things like that, contingency action, emergency response. Pretty standard fare if you're operating in the solid waste and recycling environment, but you need to make sure you understand what you need to do should you have an emergency at any given time, so it needs to be documented within this plan. And then a supplier certification and specification documents. Each hot mix producer will tell you what they want their specification to be. That's predominantly dictated by the Department of Transportation. But what we have to do is to supply them a letter that certifies that the material they're sending has gone through the quality assurance and quality control plan that had been approved by the Pollution Control Agency as well as the Department of Transportation. So each load that they're delivered is certified by us that it went through that appropriate process. So that's the facility certification letter that we have to provide to each hot mix asphalt producer that we send material to. So I'll talk a little bit about the Minnesota requirements. So, you know, like I said, each state's just a little bit different, but I'll go through Minnesota just because that's what I know the best. And I think it has laid itself out to be a pretty good model for other states that haven't gone down this road before. And I think it can be used and replicated in other successful areas of the country. So for acceptance of material on the manufactured scrap side, we have what we call beneficial reuse rules, and there are certain materials that fall under this set of rules, and you have to apply for it, and as long as you show what the beneficial use of this is and your process doesn't pose a threat to the environment or human health, you can operate under a different set of rules than a solid waste facility. You have storage restrictions, you have handling restrictions. For example, we can only store X thousand ton of this material on site. If we have more of that on site, we'll fall outside of this and we could be issued a violation. So there's still rules you have to follow. They're just a little less restrictive than if you're dealing with a different type of material, like the mixed post-consumer tear-off material, which is next. In the state of Minnesota, which is different than a lot of other states, you need to have a solid waste permit to be able to handle post-consumer tear-off shingles. It was a way for the state of Minnesota to control the number of shingle recycling facilities that popped up, and it's their way to be able to have access to the site, their way to be able to come in and inspect, and their way to shut you down if they don't feel that you're operating effectively. So, you know, initially when we went down this road, we thought it might have been a little arduous, but you know, being involved in the process and being removed from it now for quite a few years and seeing what's happened in other states, it's not a bad way to go, and I would recommend it for other states. And my reason is there's quite a few states that have had, I'll call them operators who are fly-by-night, and what they would do is they would open up a facility, accept shingles for a nominal tip fee or no tip fee, or charge just under the landfill rate. They would stockpile this large pile of shingles, and if nobody was watching that closely, we've had instances where people have just walked away from that pile and left either the landlord to clean up, the county to clean up, or just that local municipality to have to deal with the problem. So from a solid waste permit perspective, it tends to mitigate some of those issues that we've seen in other parts of the country. And there have been a few states that the shingle recycling market has died because of facilities that have started up, took in a bunch of shingles, and speculatively stockpiled that material, and they were not able to move it, and now the pile just sits there and has given a black eye to that marketplace. So one of the things within the solid waste permit is we cannot speculatively stockpile. We can't move material within a year or have a contract in place to take this material off site and show that we're consistently moving inventory. You can't accept anymore, and that's part of the solid waste permitting that we have in Minnesota, which as long as you're accepting and moving and following the rules, it's not a problem. You have to have stormwater management in place. Pretty typical for anybody handling solid waste and recycling. You have to have those types of pieces in place, but it's another regulation that you have to make sure you're in place with. And then the solid waste permit allows us to be inspected by the MPCA at any given time based on you know, their schedule or what they want to do, so they can show up on a surprise inspection anytime they want. So we're regulated by them on our consumer tear-off yard. And then we have source separated, which we'll call clean post-consumer tear-off material. In Minnesota, you might be able to get away under the beneficial use rules if they are completely clean of material. You may not have to have a solid waste permit. There has been some facilities across the country that I've talked to that have been able to do this. For some reason, we just have not been successful here in Minnesota to be able to keep this material completely clean as it comes in to fall under that set of ruling for us. So for us, the only way to do it is a solid waste permit. I call it difficult, but not impossible. We just haven't had great success at that, whereas I know of a couple facilities around the country that they're able to get their customer base to clean the material up to the point that it is clean. We've gone as far as offering rate reductions, rebates on their next load if it met a certain cleanliness criteria, but we've just never found a way to get it to the point where we didn't have to clean it up anyway. So we just, right now, we move all of our material across the sorting line just to ensure that it's free and clear of all contamination. All right, next slide in. Some of the different specifications, you know, when we first started out in the shingle recycling business, The only specification we had to deal with was 100% of our material passing the half-inch screen. And as the markets moved, then we started to get different specifications, 95% passing 3/8. Then it moved to 100% passing the 3/8. What Minnesota currently has in place now is we need to have 100% passing the half and 90% passing the number 4 sieve. And usually if you're getting 90% on the number 4, the half-inch part of that specification is a no-brainer. You're automatically going to meet that. But we've continually made the material smaller. I think 90% on the number 4 is a very good size. It works well. There are some specifications I've seen that require slightly smaller than that, and the only thing that does is just adds to the cost a little bit, because you have to screen it to a smaller size and then regrind the over. So it's not that it can't be done. It's challenging to do it on a one-pass system without having a lot of wear in your equipment. So what we found that works the best for us is to grind it, screen it, run the overs back through instead of trying to get everything through in one pass. It doesn't mean it can't be done. We've just found that to be less cost effective than being able to run the overs back over and regrind those. But the size specifications are continually getting smaller. The hot mix asphalt producers tend to like the smaller size better. From a visual perspective, you can't even tell the material's in there once it's ground that small, and they find that they can activate more of the asphalt the smaller the particle size is. So I think we'll never be back to where we were initially at 100 on the half. I think we're always going to be on the smaller size. So in this case, smaller is better. Some of the other pieces that we have to work toward while producing the high quality material is the deleterious. So I didn't really know what deleterious meant until I started working with hot mix asphalt producers. That's the terminology that they use for any contamination within their ingredient profile for their hot mix asphalt. So what we've seen across the country is deleterious specifications by weight can be anywhere from 3% down to 1/2 of 1% contamination. Our Minnesota spec is actually the 1/2 of 1%. So as we look at our material, we run it through a lab or a screen test, and basically what they'll do is they'll look at that material, and anything that's not a shingle, they pick it out, they weigh it, and if it's more than 1/2 of 1%, we didn't meet that specification. So it's a pretty tight spec as far as keeping that material clean, but we found a way to sort it and keep it clean. And I asked what the reason for the small deleterious was by weight when we started our process, and the Minnesota Department of Transportation came back to me and said all the samples we took at your facility were under 1/2 of 1%, so we thought that was a good starting point, and they worked from there, even though other states typically at that point were about 1 to 1.5%. But our material was clean, so they wanted to write a spec that continually kept our material clean, and others that entered the marketplace. So that's just a benchmark for others to look at as they're looking at that deleterious specification. And then asbestos. Year was to really provide good data that showed that there was not asbestos included in a lot of the shingle material. My data points had shown that, but they really wanted a Minnesota test to show this. So what we needed to do during our first year of processing was to test every load of material that came in. So what we needed to do is to take samples from this material as it came in, and you'll see some photos later of how we segregated the material, different things like that. We were able to move off of that arduous testing based on the results. So we went to 1 to 50 tons. So every 50 ton of incoming material, we would segregate that load, put it to the side, and do a test on it. Didn't touch that load until the test came back negative. Then we would include that in the rest of our processing. We've been able to move to 1 test per 250 ton of material, and that has been kind of a lifesaver. It does add a lot of cost for asbestos testing. One of the requirements that Minnesota had was on our initial year, we needed to have a third-party certified asbestos inspector actually take the sample, and then we had to send it to a third-party laboratory. So we had to have an outside person visit our site every day, take samples, send those samples in, and then based on the results, provide that data back to the state of Minnesota. What we've been able to move toward now is we can take our own sample on site if that person is a certified asbestos inspector. So we have a couple folks on staff that are certified asbestos inspectors, so they can pull the sample themselves, but we still need to send it off to a third-party lab. There's other folks that I know around the country that deal in a lot higher volume of shingles. Their testing is based on every load or a smaller interval than what we have to, and they've actually put their own lab on site to be able to test them themselves just because of the cost and the quick turnaround that they need. So as we started to develop a process for us for asbestos, this is kind of how we did it. You can go on to the next slide, Wayne. So what we did is we tried to implement some procedures to minimize asbestos acceptance. So what we needed to do is to have all of our haulers that we accepted post-consumer shingles within our recycling process, we needed to certify them. And what that certification basically indicated was this home only had a single layer of shingles on it. It was a single-family home, re-roofed, so it couldn't be a multi-unit dwelling. And then what our current tests are is 1 per 250 ton of pre-ground material. We have 2,000 data points from our site alone. We have one occurrence of asbestos that we found. It was in the mastic. It wasn't in the shingle. And again, as I had mentioned, MnDOT requires a certified inspector in a third-party lab. So, you know, it's one of those pieces that, you know, we worked really hard to get there. I think the data points kind of proved themselves out, and what was one of our hardest hurdles to get over now is it's not even really a discussion point anymore. So we've really been able to prove through data that the asbestos risk that was thought was there really isn't there. So that was a nice piece. It doesn't mean we shouldn't continue to test, but what it does mean is it's not an every load style test, and it's a concern that can easily be mitigated by different pieces that you do. And one of the reasons why that single layer acceptance is in there, you might be wondering, why does that have significance? I had mentioned different shingle types in the past, 25-year, 50-year. The Minnesota Home Builders Association said the average roof life in the state of Minnesota, either due to the harsh winters or storm damage, is 7 to 8 years. So there hasn't been asbestos used in shingles since the late 60s. So one of the things that was easy for us to get by off on was if we have a single family home and it's a single layer, the likelihood that single layer has been around since the late 60s, early 70s is pretty minimal. So having a single layer of material being torn off to be re-roofed and recycled really mitigates the potential for asbestos to be in that shingle. So that really helped us out quite a bit. Next slide, Wayne. So just some of the other pieces that I think would be good to have in your mental file cabinet is if you're currently in the market, you probably already know these things. If you're looking to get into the market, just be prepared for change. Make sure that you know that there might be a size change requirement coming. So as I had mentioned, we started out just with a 1/2 inch specification, and it's continually gotten smaller. So make sure any equipment that you select, make sure that your processes allow for you to adapt and to change to continually have smaller sizing. Asbestos testing changes, make sure that you're aware of how you're doing your tests, what intervals you may be required to do. And if you have enough data points, go back to that governing body and see if you can make some adjustments to it like we did. That really helped out quite a bit. Acceptance criteria may change depending on who you're selling your material to, what your state regulatory body is. And then the current rules may not be the rules of tomorrow. I think we deal in an environment where solid waste and recycling rules are continually changing, so we just need to be aware and be able to adapt to those. And to be successful in shingle recycling, you need to find quality industrial partners. And I think one of those pieces for us that was critical was to have great relationships with the hot mix asphalt producers. We, within the Twin Cities, we sell to a lot of the major hot mix folks. They were a great partner in making this work. I have to admit, early on, they were very skeptical of the material, but as we proved that we could make the material clean enough, their comfort level grew enormously, and that allowed us to continually move down the road with them. Manufacturing suppliers, whether it's the loaders you purchase, the grinding equipment you purchase, the screeners you purchase, just make sure that they are quality manufacturers of that equipment. There's a lot of good equipment providers out there. I think you just need to understand the service, the parts, all of that, all the different components of equipment prior to purchasing anything, and make sure that they're well versed in this marketplace, because it is a different material to process, and there are some people out there that really have it figured out. So just make sure that you're picking quality folks. And then roofing suppliers, make sure that you know that the people that are delivering you material have an interest in seeing this succeed as well. Depending on your marketplace and the fluctuations in supply and demand, you want to make sure that all that's communicated with all the folks that are bringing you material as well. All right, next slide, Wayne. So challenges in the market. So one of the things that we're faced with is fluctuating market conditions. One of the things that we've been able to do early on was to sell quite a bit of ground shingle material for hot mix asphalt. But as the economy started to go in a different direction back in 2009, 2010, we saw a lot of construction start to stall out. There was less new home building, less new commercial building being done, and less new road making. And what we started to see were roads just being milled and overlaid versus new roads being built. So we started to see a lot of hot mix plants take back millings and wrap material, and Minnesota has a requirement in their hot mix design that they can only use 30% recycled asphalt binder within their mixes. They have to use 70% virgin. So our shingle material fits in that 30% asphalt window within their mix design, and now we're competing with the millings that they're bringing back on their site. So the two pictures that you see in front of you aren't piles of shingle material. Those are wrap and millings. And if you look at the picture on the right, you'll see the conveyor up at the top. That's a fairly sizable conveyor. So it tells you the scope and the size of the wrap and the milling piles that some of these folks have on hand. And one of the things that's challenging for them is they really like the shingle material and it works well for them, but they have this material back on site. It's an inventoried item. They've paid for some of this material to come back to their site. So for them to use an alternative material like shingles and pay a third party like us to provide that to them, that doesn't work quite as well in their economic scenario as it does for them to use the material they have on their site. So it's just one thing to keep in mind. And in different places across the country that don't have a lot of wrap and millings in their inventory, shingles tend to move quite a bit quicker and better than they do in our marketplace currently. All right, next slide. So I'm going to blow through this next set of slides relatively quickly, but this is just a little bit of a process flow. So as shingles come into our yard, they're scaled first, and then they're tipped on our floor, and then we segregate them for asbestos testing. So as we hit that threshold, say 250 ton is where we're at right now, we'll label those. So we'll label them either A, B, C, or D, 1, 2, 3, Roman numeral 1, 2, 3, and we'll take a sample off of those, and those are segregated away from everything else. and those materials are segregated until we get the all clear example back, and then we will push those into the normal processing routine. So once we get the all clear from the asbestos, third-party asbestos lab, we'll move that material into our normal processing. All right, next slide, Wayne. So once it's cleared from the asbestos testing, I'll call it quarantine, we do a really quick pre-sort. So what we like to do on the pre-sort is pick out any large material that's not going to flow very well on a conveyor belt. So we'll pick out pallets, we'll pick out the roof sheathing like you see in that lower left-hand picture, valley tin, different things like that in the upper picture, and on the right, just anything that's large and clumpy that is kind of more trash related, we'll pick that out on the pre-sort. And then next, it comes to our metering equipment. We have a trommel screen with a solid drum in it so we don't lose the granules. And we only use that machine as a metering device. It's kind of an expensive metering device, but it's one of the best that we found because it lays the material nice and evenly across the belt, allows us to be able to see everything on the belt and to be able to pick it. So from the metering device, it goes onto the sort line, and then we place pickers on the sort line to pick basically everything out of the shingle that's not shingle and tar paper. The next step is to grind the material, and then we screen the material. So any of the overs go back out, and we regrind those, but the screen material for us is that 90% pass of the number 4. Then the last piece, it's kind of common sense, but I included on here for one reason. When we first started manufacturing some of this product, we weren't meeting the deleterious specification, and we were looking at the lab results, and some of the majority of deleterious content was rock. And we were, it's not a shingle, so it's still a deleterious material, and we found that it was from our load-out procedure. So what we needed to do is to blacktop the area that our final product rests on, so when we're scooping this material up, we're not scooping up some of the base material underneath it and having rock material contaminate our product. So I included on there, it is kind of a no-brainer, but it is one thing that caught us off guard a little bit by having a little bit of cross-contamination on the loadout. All right, next slide, Wayne. This is just a picture of some of our material being loaded into the hopper at a hot mix asphalt plant. So as you look at it, I mean, it's pretty nice quality, small-sized, clean material, and this is what it should look like. All right, fire next slide. So my last couple slides here, I just wanted to talk about the Construction and Demolition Recycling Association. As Wayne had mentioned, I'm currently the vice president of this association. Valerie Montecavo is the current president. She operates in New Jersey. I'm also the Shingle Recycling Committee chair, and it's a very active committee. We have about 40 different people that sit on the committee. We hold bi-monthly conference calls, of which maybe we have 15 to 20 folks participating on average on those calls. Some of the things that this committee works on is trying to get a full and complete list of state specifications and contacts within each state. GAF has sponsored a Find a Recycler piece of the website where you can click on a state and it'll show different folks who are shingle recyclers, which has been pretty helpful. We have best management practices, technical work papers. We're continually trying to update the website with new information as it comes out. We are working on asbestos and air quality data collection. It's challenging to get that information, but we've been working really hard to try to come up with a clearinghouse for that. And then we also host the Shingle Recycling Forum. There is a website that you guys can go and check out, www.shinglerecycling.org. It's ran by the CDRA, but it's purely dedicated to shingle recycling. So you can go out there and take a peek at that. Next slide, Wayne. The one thing for those of you on the call that are interested about more in-depth information related to shingle recycling, the CDRA hosts a biannual shingle recycling forum, as I mentioned on the previous slide. I feel it's the best industry meeting place for shingle recyclers. Anybody that is looking to enter the market, to refine what they're currently doing, or to find other alternative uses for the material, it's a great place for them to go. We had held the conference in 2013 in Denver. 2014 was our year that we don't host it, and we're back working on it for 2015. Typically, it's about this time of the year in the fall. We haven't picked the location yet. We are vacillating between 3 different options right now, be it Washington, California, or North Carolina. The committee's working on trying to find this location and get that out. And as soon as we do, maybe I can work with Wayne and the NRC to make sure that all you folks that have any interest get that information. But there's 300 plus folks there, and it is purely shingle recycling for about a day and a half. We'll usually go and have a tour as well to a shingle recycling yard. So it's a great opportunity for people that are interested in this part of the business and marketplace to get together and share war stories, try to gather new information, and see what other opportunities are out there. And I think that is it. My contact information is on this next slide. Feel free to email me, give me a call. I'm always open to talking with folks. I don't have all the answers. What I can do is share with you what our experiences are, hopefully prevent you from making some of the mistakes that we might have made in the past, and if we can do that, that's a good goal for us to have. So I'd be happy, Wayne, to take any questions that might have come across from anybody on the phone, but that's it. I appreciate the time.
Okay, thank you, Jason. Great presentation. Okay, we're now going to field some questions for our presenter. And again, if you have a question, please enter the question on the GoToWebinar dialog box. And we already do have a few questions, Jason, so I'll start off with, I think it's a terminology question, really.
Okay.
The question was, what are organic-based shingles?
So the difference between fiberglass and organic-based shingles are just what's used in the manufacturing process. So if you think of a fiberglass shingle, they're typically what we see, and they use fiberglass as part of the filler process for the shingle. So they're a little bit thinner, and if you break the shingle in half, you'll actually see the fiberglass fibers in the shingle. An organic shingle, instead of using fiberglass, they use paper. So there's a lot of shingle manufacturers that used to be large recyclers of OCC or cardboard and newspaper. They used to use cardboard, newspaper, break that material back down, and then they would use that as an ingredient in their shingle manufacturing process. So really the only difference is they're using fiberglass versus using paper. And the fiberglass shingles typically are considerably lighter. They're not as thick, and thickness doesn't necessarily mean quality. It's just the fiberglass fibers are much smaller than the paper that they need to add. And again, I'm not an expert on shingle manufacturing, but that's what I know. We have a plant in Shakopee, which is where we're located. It's a very large certainty manufacturing plant, and they used to make organic shingles, and they were a very large recycler of cardboard and paper at the time, and they have since gone away from making organic shingles. In our marketplace, the fiberglass shingles just tend to last longer, and I think across the country that's probably proven to be true too. So it's a difference in the ingredients that they use as they manufacture their shingle.
Okay, this next question, it actually might be a proprietary issue, but they ask who designed your C&D MRF?
Our C&D MRF, which is separate from the shingle recycling equipment, we used a company called Aaron Systems that is owned by Premier Tech out of Quebec, Canada. They currently are not selling C&D systems any longer. There's multiple people out there that are currently manufacturing equipment for that purpose, and if whoever sent that question out, if they want to contact me directly, I'd be happy to share with them the other manufacturers that are within the marketplace.
And maybe you can talk about the vendors of your other processing lines.
Sure. Yep, I can do that. So our single stream line, we use CP Group out of San Diego, and specifically on our shingle recycling line, you saw our metering, what I call our metering device, really is just a solid drum trommel screen. We use Dopstat equipment for that. Our sort line, which follows that piece of equipment, is also a Dopstat unit. They've worked very well. The trommel screen that we use on the front end for a metering device is a Dopstat, as I had mentioned, but it has kind of a unique feature that, based on the weight of material tumbling in the trommel drum, the conveyor either speeds up or slows down to make sure we always have the right amount of material in there, which I think provides us a very nice burden depth on the conveyor belt, which lays it out really nice, because in that process we need to be able to pick out things as small as a hammerhead. You know, if you think of a hammerhead or the end of a pitchfork, a lot of those things are used for roofing projects, and when they get into the grinder, that's a bad thing. So we want to make sure that whatever equipment we use, it highlights that material or presents itself for us to be able to catch it prior to that material going into the grinder. So our cleaning equipment is really DOPSTAT. Our shingle grinders, we have multiple, both of them are rotochopper. As I had mentioned, there's other manufacturers out there in the marketplace. There's a few that make shingle specific grinding equipment, but we use rotochopper. They're located here in Minnesota, so they were a great logical choice for us to use. But again, there's other, I'm not here to tell you which one's better or worse. That's what we've had. We've had good experience with them. And then we use Vermeer trommel screens to size our material on the back end once it comes off the grinder.
Okay, this question dealt with the percentages of tests that failed for asbestos. Now, in your presentation, I noted in the beginning you mentioned 13 instances out of, was it 100,000 data points?
Correct.
And then later on you had, I guess at your facility, one instance in 2,000 data points.
Correct.
Which I did the math, it's 0.013% for the first one and 0.05% for the second. So I just want to confirm that.
Yep. Those numbers are accurate, and I think my 2,000 number for us doesn't have our 2014 data in it, so that would have been pre this year. So our numbers have gotten bigger through this year. We didn't have any hits of didn't have any asbestos hits this year as well, so our percentage would go down. And if you look at on the larger scale, and that was done, I did that research back in 2008, 2009. The majority of those hits that we found were in the Northeast, and that predominantly was generated because Canada had a different time frame of when they stopped using asbestos materials within their manufactured products. They lagged a little bit later than when the U.S. cutoff was, so some of the shingle material manufactured in Canada trickled its way into the northeast part of the country. But those data points continually get, the data points get larger, and the number of hits as a percentage of those points continually gets smaller. So, you know, there was concern that every single shingle on a roof had asbestos in it, and I think the data points that are out there really show that that's not the case. And that's what we're trying to do from a shingle recycling committee in the CDRA is let's not brush it to the side. We deal with C&D debris, so we understand the human health impacts of asbestos, but let's just make sure that we're looking at it within the right perspective of what it is.
Here's another asbestos question. For mixed post-consumer shingles, is there a fixed perimeter air sampling system in place? And are there any other testing parameters?
We currently do not have a fixed air monitoring system in place. What we've done is take air monitoring samples periodically throughout our process. So we'll put air monitoring devices on our folks operating in that area at different times throughout the year and different years. And we have yet to find asbestos in any of those samples. And for any other airborne particulate, we are well below the 8-hour OSHA standard from an airborne particulate piece. So we have done work on that and have data to support that as well.
Okay, next question. The Michigan DOT has written a permissive spec to be able to use tear-off shingles in HMA. We've been told by various pavers that it's near impossible to meet the FHWA super pave spec, so shingles are not being used on state or federal highways. How is this material being used in Minnesota?
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think based on some of the specifications for super pave and the way that they are testing that material, it is challenging in the laboratory to get those to work out. I would say in the state of Minnesota, we see it used heavily on almost everything that's not an interstate highway. We see it's a permissive spec here as well. If it's a super paved job, we typically don't see it. So on post-consumer tear-offs, we'll see them in the base layer of a heavy traffic road. Otherwise, we see it predominantly in state highways that aren't a super paved spec. We'll see it in county roads. We'll see it in commercial parking lots. Myself and my business partner, we paved both of our driveways with it. Our industrial application here, if you think back to that overview picture within the presentation, one of the earlier ones, all of our pavement around all of our site, around our single stream MRF, around our C&D MRF, any paving we do out here has a 5% shingle additive mix in it. And we kind of put our money where our mouth is, because back when we started, back in 2007, 2008, we didn't really know the mix designs all that well, so we worked with HMAs. They produced material for us, and we wanted to see how it was going to hold up, and it held up very, very well. We have roll-off trucks, we have 80,000-pound tractor trailers, we have our yellow iron driving on this equipment every day, and we have yet to have to replace any of it. So it all comes down to mix design and making sure that the mix design is done well, and the ingredients that are put in are high quality, the contamination levels are where they need to be, the sizing is appropriate. And as far as federal highways, they've been very active with the Shingle Recycling Forum. We work with those folks there pretty closely, and I think that's one of the next steps that we need to do, is to ensure that if there's different specifications that they're putting out, let's make sure that shingles can still be a part of that. So I think that's a good initiative for us to look at, and even have them work on something related to that we can bring to the forum in 2015.
Okay, this the next question is related, and I think you may have answered part of it. It's concerning the quality of the asphalt and the economic aspects. Is it RAS make a better asphalt? And then as far as the pricing, is there a difference?
Yep. So the early on, a lot of discussion was around how much should you be able to charge for your shingle product, and the simple math is, if they can use, if there's 20% asphalt in there and you sell them a ton of it, it should be whatever the asphalt price is at 20%, and that's what you should be able to sell it to them for. And I'm not necessarily sure that math works, because there are a lot of things that the HMAs need to do with this material to prep it to be ready to use as part of their ingredients. And I learned a lot of this along the way. So, they can't just take this material, include it in there, and call it good. A lot of times what they'll have to do, because the asphalt used in the shingle is much stiffer than the asphalt they use for making roads, so that what they have to do multiple things. They either have to buy a product that chemically makes this material softer, which costs them money to be able to do, or they have to buy a softer asphalt to blend with the shingle material, which costs them more money. So it's not quite a simple math calculation of asphalt price to what percentage of asphalt they're getting from the shingle, and that's what you should be able to charge. It's a little bit more detailed than that. The asphalt, there's no question that it's much stiffer, and especially in our operating area in northern climates where you're susceptible to low temperature levels, the issue is they don't want premature cracking. And when you have a stiff asphalt, as the temperature drops, the likelihood of cracking increases. So as they're developing their mix designs, they really need to ensure that the asphalt they're using as a blend of, be it shingles or non-shingles, that the asphalt's soft enough to be able to withstand the cold temperatures and not to have premature cracking. The flip side of that is they don't want it too soft that you have too much rutting in your roads either. So, there's different climate conditions that have to have different mix designs developed for this. So it's, I learned a lot about hot mix asphalt production. I'm by far an expert, but you know, working with them tells you a lot about how you need to work very, very closely with them to make sure the product works for them. As we entered this market space, you know, our main objective in our communication was we don't want to introduce a product to the market that's substandard to what's currently out there, because it's not going to be sustainable. So that's why we took it slow and made sure that we could get mixed designs that were properly done, and we've been able to move it forward using that methodology.
Okay, we're just about out of time. We do have some questions here that weren't answered, but you know, I encourage the attendees to contact Jason and do some follow-up, perhaps by email. You can do that. So
yeah, I'd be happy to take any questions via email, or for you to give me a call too. Yep. No problem.
Okay, so thank you, Jason, for answering the questions, and thank you for those questions from the audience. Again, in closing, again, this webinar, like all the webinars in this series, has been recorded and will be made available via YouTube links on both the National Recycling Coalition and Recycling Market Center websites. And thanks again for joining us. We hope you'll join us for next month's webinar, which I believe is on November 18th. And so please visit the NRC or RMC websites for scheduling updates. Thanks again, Jason, and thanks again, audience, for joining us, and we'll see you next time. And have a great day.